Hey guys, tonight we journey back to a quiet stretch of early 19th century America, to a place where nothing particularly dramatic happens, where no grand battles are fought, no famous speeches are delivered, and no great inventions suddenly change the course of history. Instead, we settle into a single, ordinary day in the life of an average American in the year 1820. A day so uneventful, so routine, that it might almost slip past unnoticed, if not for the slow rhythm of life that defines it. There are no clocks ticking loudly in every room, no glowing screens, no urgent messages demanding attention. Just the soft, persistent passage of time, marked by sunlight, labor, and small, repetitive tasks. The day begins before the sun has fully risen. A faint gray light seeps through a small window, barely pushing back the darkness inside a modest wooden home. The air is cool, carrying the lingering chill of the night. The man of the house wakes first, not because of an alarm, but because his body has long since learned this pattern. Years of habit have trained him to rise at this hour, when the sky is still undecided between night and morning. He sits up slowly on a straw-filled mattress, the wooden frame creaking faintly beneath his weight. There is no rush, no sudden urgency, just a quiet acceptance that the day has begun again. Beside him, his wife stirs, though she does not rise immediately. The room smells faintly of wood smoke and worn fabric, familiar and unchanging. Pulling on his clothes, simple, durable garments that have been mended more than once, he moves toward the door. Each step is deliberate, the floorboards softly complaining underfoot. Outside, the world is still and muted. A thin mist clings to the ground, and the distant outline of trees stands motionless against the pale sky. There is work to be done, though none of it is new or surprising. He begins with the animals. The routine is so deeply ingrained that it requires almost no thought. The small barn, rough and weathered, stands a short distance from the house. Inside, the animals shift and breathe, aware that the day has started even before the sun fully confirms it. Feeding them is not a task filled with excitement. It is steady, repetitive, and necessary. Each movement follows the one before it in a quiet sequence, lifting, pouring, checking, adjusting. The sounds are soft, the rustle of hay, the low murmurs of livestock, the faint scrape of wood against wood. Back inside the house, a small fire is coaxed back to life. The wife now rises, wrapping herself in the same routine she has followed countless times before. There is no discussion about what needs to be done. Both of them already know. Words are used sparingly in the early morning, not out of tension, but because they are unnecessary. Breakfast is simple. Perhaps some bread, a bit of porridge, maybe a small portion of preserved food, if supplies allow. There is no elaborate preparation, no variety to speak of. The meal serves its purpose, nothing more. They eat quietly, the only sounds being the faint clink of utensils and the occasional shifting of a chair. As the light outside strengthens, pace of the day gradually increases, though never to the point of urgency. There are fields to tend, tools to maintain, small repairs that cannot be ignored forever. Each task is familiar, repeated so often that it feels almost like a continuation of the day before rather than something new. Out in the field, the soil is turned slowly, methodically. The work is physical, steady, and unremarkable. There are no sudden changes, no unexpected events, just the consistent effort of hands and body moving in coordination. The sun climbs higher, warming the air, though not enough to make the labor comfortable. Time passes in a way that feels both slow and strangely quick. There are no clear markers dividing 1 hour from the next, only the gradual shift of light and the subtle changes in the position of shadows. Occasionally, there is a pause, not for rest exactly, but simply because the body demands a brief stillness. During these moments, there is little to observe beyond the same landscape that has always been there, the same trees, the same fields, the same distant horizon. Nothing has changed, and nothing seems likely to. Back at the house, the wife continues her own cycle of tasks. Cleaning, mending, preparing food for later, perhaps tending a small garden. Each action is quiet, purposeful, and repetitive. There is a certain rhythm to it, though not one that stands out or draws attention to itself. If there are children, their day is equally uneventful. Small chores, simple play, learning by observation rather than instruction. There are no structured lessons, no strict schedules, just a gradual absorption into the same patterns that define the adults around them. By midday, the sun sits high in the sky, casting a steady, unwavering light over everything. Work slows slightly, not because it is finished, but because the heat and effort require a brief easing. The meal at this time is as simple as the one before, perhaps even more so. Again, there is little conversation. Words are reserved for necessity, not for filling silence. The afternoon stretches out in much the same way as the morning. Tasks continue, one after another, blending together until it becomes difficult to separate them in memory. There is no single moment that stands out, no event that demands attention, and that is, in a way, the defining feature of the day, its sameness. Nothing extraordinary happens. Nothing unusual interrupts the flow. The hours pass not with excitement or tension, but with a steady, almost unnoticeable progression. As the sun begins its slow descent, the light softens. Shadows lengthen, and the air cools slightly. Work does not stop immediately, but it begins to wind down. There is an understanding, unspoken but clear, that the day is nearing its end. Tools are set aside. Animals are checked once more, and the final tasks are completed with the same quiet efficiency as the first. Inside the house, the fire is tended again. The evening meal is prepared, much like the others, simple, functional, and familiar. There may be a few more words exchanged now, though still not many. Fatigue has settled in, not sharply, but as a gentle, persistent weight. After eating, there is little left to do. Perhaps a small repair, perhaps a moment of sitting in silence. There are no elaborate entertainments, no distractions pulling attention in different directions. The day does not end with a dramatic conclusion, but rather fades out gradually, like the light outside. Darkness returns, just as it did the night before. The man lies down once more on the same straw mattress, the same creak of wood marking the motion. The room is quiet again, the air still. Outside, the world has settled into its nighttime rhythm, unchanged and undisturbed. And as sleep slowly takes hold, there is no sense of anticipation for tomorrow, no expectation of something different, because tomorrow will be much the same waking, the same work, the same quiet passing of hours. And in that repetition, the days continue, one after another, blending together into a life that is not defined by moments of excitement, but by the steady, unbroken rhythm of ordinary existence. The slow approach of another morning does not announce itself with any urgency. It arrives gradually, almost reluctantly, as a thin layer of gray replaces the darkness inside the small wooden home. There is no moment where night suddenly becomes day, only a quiet transition that unfolds without drawing attention to itself. The man wakes again, not because anything has changed, but because nothing ever really does. His body follows the same pattern it has followed for years, rising before the sun has fully claimed the sky. For a brief moment, he remains still, neither asleep nor fully awake, caught in that familiar space where thoughts do not yet have shape. Then, without ceremony, he sits up. The room feels much the same as it did the night before. The faint scent of cooled ashes lingers in the air, mixed with the dry, worn smell of wood and fabric. There is no sense of freshness, no feeling of a new beginning, just a continuation. His feet meet the wooden floor, cool and slightly uneven. Each movement is quiet, practiced. There is no hesitation, no need to decide what comes next. The day has already been decided long before it begins. Outside, the world appears unchanged. The same stretch of land, the same outlines of trees, the same stillness. Even the air feels familiar, carrying a chill that has been felt countless times before. If there is any difference at all, it is too small to notice. The animals wait again, just as they always do. Their needs are predictable, steady, and unvaried. Feeding them requires the same motions, the same packing, the same small adjustments. There is no satisfaction in completing the task, only the quiet understanding that it must be done. Back inside, the fire must be coaxed back to life once more. It does not spring up eagerly. It requires patience, small, careful movements, and a steady hand. A faint glow becomes a small flame, and eventually, something capable of warming the room, though never completely. The woman wakes soon after, following her own well-worn routine. There is no need for conversation, and none is offered. Words would not change anything about what needs to be done, and so they remain unspoken. Breakfast is prepared again, nearly identical to the one before. The same simple ingredients, the same limited choices. There is no expectation of variety, and no disappointment in its absence. They eat because it is necessary, not because it offers any particular enjoyment. Outside, the light grows stronger, though it does so without any dramatic shift. The sky moves from pale gray to a muted blue, and the outlines of the land become clearer. Another day has begun, though it feels indistinguishable from the last. The work resumes. There is a section of fencing that requires attention today, though it is not urgent. It could have been repaired yesterday, or the day before, or even left for tomorrow. But it is noticed now, and so it becomes part of the day. The man gathers the necessary tools, each one worn from years of use. The handles are smooth where hands have gripped them countless times, the edges dulled, but still functional. Nothing is new, and nothing needs to be. The process of repair is slow and methodical. There is no rush, no pressure to finish quickly. Each movement follows naturally from the last, lifting, aligning, securing. The work demands attention, but not thought. It is the kind of task that allows the mind to remain quiet. Nearby, the land stretches out in the same way it always has. There are no passing travelers today, no distant figures moving along the horizon. Even if there were, it would not change the rhythm of the work. Inside the house, the woman continues her tasks. A piece of clothing requires mending, the fabric worn thin in places. The needle moves in and out with steady precision, each stitch nearly identical to the one before. There is no creativity in the process, no variation, only the quiet repetition of a necessary skill. Time passes, though it does not feel as though it moves. The position of the sun changes, but slowly enough that it goes unnoticed until much later. Shadows shift, lengthen, and disappear without drawing attention to themselves. At some point, the children, if they are present, drift between small tasks and moments of idle movement. They do not question the routine, because it is all they have ever known. A small bucket carried from one place to another. A simple instruction followed without resistance. These are the markers of their day. Midday arrives without announcement. There is no clock to confirm it, no signal beyond the position of the sun and the quiet recognition of hunger. Work slows, though it does not fully stop. The meal is, once again, simple. There is no anticipation leading up to it, and no lingering afterward. It is a brief pause, nothing more. The afternoon resumes in the same manner as before. The repaired section of fence is inspected, not because it is expected to fail, but because there is little else to do in that moment. A small adjustment is made, it likely changes very little. There are always more tasks, though none of them stand out. A tool may need cleaning. A small area of land may require attention. A minor issue may be addressed before it becomes a larger one. Each action blends into the next, forming a continuous stretch of quiet activity. There is no sense of progress in the way one might expect. The work does not build toward a clear result, nor does it create a lasting change. Instead, it maintains what already exists, preventing things from falling into disrepair. As the day moves forward, fatigue begins to settle in again. Not sharply, not suddenly, but as a gradual weight that becomes harder to ignore. Muscles grow slower, movements less precise, though the tasks continue regardless. The light begins to soften once more. The sky shifts in color, though the change is subtle. There is no dramatic sunset, no vivid display, just a gradual dimming that signals the approach of evening. The animals are checked again, just as they were in the morning. Their needs have not changed, and neither has the method of meeting them. Inside the house, the fire is tended once more. The process is easier now, as there are still embers remaining from earlier. A small effort is enough to bring it back to life. The evening meal is prepared in the same quiet manner. There is no variation, no surprise. The food is eaten slowly, not out of enjoyment, but because the body requires it. There may be a few words spoken now, though they are simple and practical. A brief mention of something that needs to be done tomorrow, or a small observation about the day. Nothing that lingers, nothing that carries weight. Afterward, there is a short period of stillness. The man may sit, his hands resting idly for the first time that day. The woman may finish a final small task, or simply pause as well. The children, if present, grow quiet. There is nothing left to fill the time. Darkness settles in again, just as it always does. The transition is slow, steady, and familiar. The room becomes dim, then shadowed, then nearly black. One by one, they prepare for sleep. The straw mattress offers the same level of comfort it always has, which is to say, very little. The wooden frame creaks again, unchanged from the night before. As the man lies down, there is no reflection on the day that has passed. There is nothing to reflect on that differs from any other day. No moment stands out. No event demands to be remembered. Sleep comes gradually, and somewhere in the quiet of the night, as the world remains still and unchanged, another identical day waits just beyond the darkness, ready to begin again in exactly the same way, somewhere in the deep quiet of the night, long after the last faint glow of the fire has faded into a dull, hidden warmth beneath the ashes. The world remains suspended in stillness. There is no movement inside the house, no sound beyond the occasional settling of wood or the distant, indistinct noise of something shifting outside in the dark. Time continues, but it does so without being noticed. Eventually, Without any clear dividing line, the night begins to loosen its hold. The first sign is not light, but a subtle change in the air, a feeling rather than something seen. Then, slowly, the darkness thins. The same window that admitted a faint gray glow the day before does so again, allowing another morning to arrive without ceremony. The man wakes, as he always does, before there is enough light to clearly see the room around him. For a brief moment, he remains still, caught between sleep and waking, his thoughts unformed and directionless. There is no urgency pressing him forward, no task calling his name. And yet, after only a short pause, he rises anyway. The routine does not require motivation. It exists independently of how he feels. He sits up, the now familiar creak of the wooden frame marking the start of movement. The straw beneath him shifts slightly, offering the same uneven support it always has. There is no improvement, no worsening, only consistency. His feet touch the floor again, and it feels just as it did yesterday. Cool, firm, slightly worn in places where countless steps have been taken before. He stands, moving slowly, but without hesitation. The door opens, and the outside greets him with the same quiet indifference. A thin layer of mist once again clings to the ground, though it is impossible to tell if it is the same mist or simply one that looks identical. The trees stand in their usual places, unmoved and unchanged. The animals, as always, are waiting. Their presence does not vary. They require the same care, the same attention, the same actions. Feeding them is neither satisfying nor frustrating. It is simply something that happens. The rhythm continues. Lifting, carrying, placing, checking. Each movement blends into the next until they form a continuous pattern with no clear beginning or end. Inside the house, the woman wakes again. Her routine mirrors his in its predictability. There is no conversation about what the day will bring, because the day has already been decided by countless days before it. The fire must be brought back to life once more. It resists slightly, as it always does, before eventually yielding to careful effort. A small flame grows, then steadies, offering a modest warmth that never fully fills the space. Breakfast follows the same pattern. The same simple preparation, the same limited choices, the same quiet consumption. There is no expectation of change, and none arrives. Outside, the light strengthens gradually. The sky transitions through familiar shades, none of them remarkable enough to hold attention for long. Another day has begun, though it carries no sense of novelty. The man steps out toward the field again, though today there is no specific task waiting. Instead, there are many small things that could be done, none of them urgent, all of them equally necessary. He begins with the soil, turning it in slow, steady motions. The work feels the same as it always has, neither easier nor harder. The body moves because it must, guided by habit rather than thought. There is a certain quiet within the repetition, not a peaceful quiet, but one that lacks interruption. The mind drifts, though it never strays far from the task at hand. Nearby, a tool lies slightly out of place. It is picked up, examined briefly, then set where it belongs. This small action carries no significance, yet it becomes part of the day all the same. Inside, the woman continues her work. A small pot is cleaned, though it will need cleaning again later. A surface is wiped, though it will gather dust once more. The tasks do not end, they simply repeat. If there are children, they move through their own version of the same pattern. A simple instruction is followed, then another. There is no resistance, because there is no alternative. Time passes, though it remains difficult to measure. There are no clear divisions, no moments that stand apart from the rest. The sun climbs higher, but it does so slowly enough that its movement feels almost imaginary. At some point, the man pauses. Not because he has finished anything, but because the body requires a brief stillness. He stands, looking out over the same stretch of land that has always been there. There is nothing new to see. The horizon remains unchanged, the trees unmoved, the sky empty of anything unusual. Even the air feels familiar, carrying the same quiet stillness. After a moment, the work resumes. A small section of ground is cleared. A minor adjustment is made to something that may not have needed adjusting. Each action fills time, though it does not alter the day in any meaningful way. Midday arrives again, marked only by a subtle awareness rather than any clear signal. The light is stronger now, the warmth more noticeable, though not enough to make the work stop entirely. The meal is prepared and eaten with the same quiet efficiency as before. There is no variation, no change in pace. It is simply another part of the day moving past. The afternoon stretches out, long and unbroken. The tasks continue, blending together into a steady flow of movement and effort. A small repair is made to a tool handle. The wood is worn, but still usable. The adjustment does not improve it significantly, but it delays the need for a larger repair. Nearby, the animals move slightly, though their behavior remains predictable. They eat, they rest, they shift in place. Nothing unexpected occurs. The light begins to soften once more, though the change is gradual enough that it goes unnoticed until it is nearly complete. Fatigue returns, settling into the body with the same quiet persistence as before. Movements slow slightly, though they do not stop. Eventually, the work begins to wind down. Tools are set aside, not because everything is finished, but because the day is ending. The distinction is important, though it is never spoken aloud. The animals are checked again. The same routine, the same actions, the same quiet sounds. Inside the house, the fire is brought back to life once more. The process is easier now, familiar enough to require little effort. The evening meal is prepared and eaten in the same way as all the others. There is no anticipation, no reflection, just the steady completion of another necessary task. There may be a few words spoken, though they carry no particular weight. A simple observation, a brief mention of something that may or may not be done tomorrow. Afterward, there is stillness again. The man sits for a short time, his hands resting, his body slowly releasing the tension of the day. The woman finishes a final task, then pauses as well. The children grow quiet. There is nothing left to fill the time. Darkness returns, slowly but inevitably. The room fades into shadow, then into near-complete darkness. They prepare for sleep once more. The same bed, the same creak, the same uneven surface. Nothing has changed. As the man lies down, there is no sense that the day has ended, only that it has paused. Sleep comes again, gradual and quiet. The next morning does not feel like a beginning. It feels like a continuation that never truly stopped. The darkness fades in the same slow, almost reluctant way, and the thin gray light returns to the small room as if it had never really left. The man wakes again before the sun has risen fully. There is no surprise in it, no moment of adjustment. His body follows its familiar pattern, lifting him out of rest without question. For a brief stretch of time, he lies still, not thinking about anything in particular. The day has not yet taken shape, though in truth, it already has. He sits up, and the bed responds with its usual faint creak. The sound is so familiar that it barely registers. The straw beneath him shifts slightly, offering the same uneven support it always has. Nothing about it is new, and nothing about it needs to be. His feet touch the floor, and again, it feels exactly the same cool, solid, worn by repetition. There is no hesitation as he stands. There never is. Outside, the air carries that same quiet chill. The land looks unchanged, as though time has paused and resumed without leaving any trace behind. A light mist rests low to the ground, and the trees stand still, offering no movement to suggest anything different. The animals are waiting, just as they always are. There is no variation in their needs, and so there is no variation in the way they are met. Feed is gathered, distributed, checked. The same sequence unfolds without interruption. The sounds are soft and predictable, the shifting of hooves, the rustle of hay, the faint exhale of breath in the cool morning air. Inside the house, the woman rises not long after. Her movements are quiet, measured, and familiar. There is no need to ask what the day will require. The answer is already known. The fire must be coaxed back into life again. It responds in the same way as before, reluctant at first, then gradually steady. A small flame grows, offering a modest warmth that never quite reaches the edges of the room. Breakfast follows the same quiet routine. There is no change in what is prepared, no difference in how it is eaten. The meal is simple, necessary, and quickly finished. Words are few, and when they are spoken, they are brief and practical. The light outside grows stronger, though not dramatically. The sky shifts through its usual colors, none of them remarkable enough to draw attention. Another day has begun, though it feels as though it never truly ended. The man steps outside again, moving toward the field. There is no single task waiting, only a collection of small responsibilities that must be addressed in time. Today, a section of soil feels slightly more compact than before. It does not demand immediate attention, but it is noticed, and so it becomes the focus. The tool is lifted, and the work begins. The motion is slow and steady. Each turn of the soil follows the last, forming a quiet rhythm that continues without interruption. There is no sense of progress, only the continuation of effort. Nearby, the same landscape stretches out, unchanged. The horizon remains still, the trees unmoving, the air undisturbed. There are no visitors, no distant figures, nothing to interrupt the quiet repetition of the day. Inside, the woman continues her own work. A small tear in a garment is repaired with careful, even stitches. The needle moves in and out of the fabric in a steady pattern, each motion nearly identical to the one before. There is no variation, no creativity, only function. A pot is placed near the fire, not because something new is being prepared, but because it will be needed later. The timing is not exact, but it does not need to be. Everything follows a general rhythm rather than a precise schedule. If children are present, they move through their tasks quietly. A small chore is completed, then another. There is no questioning, no delay. The routine is not taught, it is absorbed. Time passes in the same indistinct way. The sun climbs higher, though it does so without drawing attention. Shadows shift, but slowly enough that their movement goes unnoticed. At some point, the man pauses again, not because the work is finished, but because the body requires a moment of stillness. He leans slightly on the tool, looking out across the same stretch of land. There is nothing new to see. The air feels the same. The ground looks the same. Even the silence remains unchanged. After a short while, the work resumes. A small stone is moved from one place to another. It does not make a significant difference, but it is done anyway. These small actions fill the day, giving it structure without altering its nature. Midday arrives quietly. There is no clear signal, only a subtle awareness that it is time to pause. The meal is prepared and eaten in the same way as before. There is no variation, no change in pace. It is a brief interruption in the work, nothing more. The afternoon stretches ahead, long and steady. The tasks continue, blending together into a single, unbroken sequence. A tool is cleaned, though it will gather dirt again. A small adjustment is made to a section of fence, though it will likely need attention again in time. Each action maintains what already exists rather than creating something new. The animals move slightly, shifting their weight, adjusting their positions. Their behavior remains predictable, offering no surprises. The light begins to soften once more. The change is gradual, almost imperceptible, until it is nearly complete. Fatigue returns again, settling into the body in the same quiet way. Movements slow slightly, though the work continues. Eventually, the day begins to wind down. The tools are set aside, not because everything is finished, but because the light is fading. The distinction is subtle, but it defines the end of the working hours. The animals are checked again. The same routine, the same quiet sounds, the same steady rhythm. Inside, the fire is brought back to life once more. The process is familiar enough to require little thought. The evening meal is prepared and eaten in the same quiet manner. There is no anticipation, no reflection, just the completion of another necessary task. A few words may be spoken, though they are simple and brief. Perhaps a mention of something that needs to be done the next day, or a small observation about the weather. Nothing that lingers. Afterward, there is stillness again. The man sits for a short time, his hands resting, his body slowly releasing the effort of the day. The woman finishes a final task, then pauses as well. The children grow quiet. There is nothing left to fill the time. Darkness settles in once more, slowly and without resistance. The room fades into shadow, then into near-complete darkness. They prepare for sleep again. The same bed, the same creak, the same uneven surface. Nothing has changed, and nothing is expected to. As the man lies down, there is no sense of completion. The day does not feel finished, it simply stops. Sleep comes gradually, just as it always does. The next morning does not feel like a beginning. It feels like a continuation that never truly stopped. The darkness fades in the same slow, almost reluctant way, and the thin gray light returns to the small room as if it had never really left. The man wakes again before the sun has risen fully. There is no surprise in it, no moment of adjustment. His body follows its familiar pattern, lifting him out of rest without question. For a brief stretch of time, he lies still, not thinking about anything in particular. The day has not yet taken shape, though in truth, it already has. He sits up, and the bed responds with its usual faint creak. The sound is so familiar that it barely registers. The straw beneath him shifts slightly, offering the same uneven support it always has. Nothing about it is new, and nothing about it needs to be. His feet touch the floor, and again, it feels exactly the same cool, solid, worn by repetition. There is no hesitation as he stands. There never is. Outside, the air carries that same quiet chill. The land looks unchanged, as though time has paused and resumed without leaving any trace behind. A light mist rests low to the ground, and the tree stands still, offering no movement to suggest anything different. The animals are waiting, just as they always are. There is no variation in their needs, and so there is no variation in the way they are met. Feed is gathered, distributed, checked. The same sequence unfolds without interruption. The sounds are soft and predictable, the shifting of hooves, the rustle of hay, the faint exhale of breath in the cool morning air. Inside the house, the woman rises not long after. Her movements are quiet, measured, and familiar. There is no need to ask what the day will require. The answer is already known. The fire must be coaxed back into life again. It responds in the same way as before, reluctant at first, then gradually steady. A small flame grows, offering a modest warmth that never quite reaches the edges of the room. Breakfast follows the same quiet routine. There is no change in what is prepared, no difference in how it is eaten. The meal is simple, necessary, and quickly finished. Words are few, and when they are spoken, they are brief and practical. The light outside grows stronger, though not dramatically. The sky shifts through its usual colors, none of them remarkable enough to draw attention. Another day has begun, though it feels as though it never truly ended. The man steps outside again, moving toward the field. There is no single task waiting, only a collection of small responsibilities that must be addressed in time. Today, a section of soil feels slightly more compact than before. It does not demand immediate attention, but it is noticed, and so it becomes the focus. The tool is lifted, and the work begins. The motion is slow and steady. Each turn of the soil follows the last, forming a quiet rhythm that continues without interruption. There is no sense of progress, only the continuation of effort. Nearby, the same landscape stretches out, unchanged. The horizon remains still, the trees unmoving, the air undisturbed. There are no visitors, no distant figures, nothing to interrupt the quiet repetition of the day. Inside, the woman continues her own work. A small tear in a garment is repaired with careful, even stitches. The needle moves in and out of the fabric in a steady pattern, each motion nearly identical to the one before. There is no variation, no creativity, only function. A pot is placed near the fire, not because something new is being prepared, but because it will be needed later. The timing is not exact, but it does not need to be. Everything follows a general rhythm rather than a precise schedule. If children are present, they move through their tasks quietly. A small chore is completed, then another. There is no questioning, no delay. The routine is not taught, it is absorbed. Time passes in the same indistinct way. The sun climbs higher, though it does so without drawing attention. Shadows shift, but slowly enough that their movement goes unnoticed. At some point, the man pauses again. Not because the work is finished, but because the body requires a moment of stillness. He leans slightly on the tool, looking out across the same stretch of land. There is nothing new to see. The air feels the same. The ground looks the same. Even the silence remains unchanged. After a short while, the work resumes. A small stone is moved from one place to another. It does not make a significant difference, but it is done anyway. These small actions fill the day, giving it structure without altering its nature. Midday arrives quietly. There is no clear signal, only a subtle awareness that it is time to pause. The meal is prepared and eaten in the same way as before. There is no variation, no change in pace. It is a brief interruption in the work, nothing more. The afternoon stretches ahead, long and steady. The tasks continue, blending together into a single, unbroken sequence. A tool is cleaned, though it will gather dirt again. A small adjustment is made to a section of fence, though it will likely need attention again in time. Each action maintains what already exists rather than creating something new. The animals move slightly, shifting their weight, adjusting their positions. Their behavior remains predictable, offering no surprises. The light begins to soften once more. The change is gradual, almost imperceptible, until it is nearly complete. Fatigue returns again, settling into the body in the same quiet way. Movements slow slightly, though the work continues. Eventually, the day begins to wind down. The tools are set aside, not because everything is finished, but because the light is fading. The distinction is subtle, but it defines the end of the working hours. The animals are checked again. The same routine, the same quiet sounds, the same steady rhythm. Inside, the fire is brought back to life once more. The process is familiar enough to require little thought. The evening meal is prepared and eaten in the same quiet manner. There is no anticipation, no reflection, just the completion of another necessary task. A few words may be spoken, though they are simple and brief. Perhaps a mention of something that needs to be done the next day, or a small observation about the weather. Nothing that lingers. Afterward, there is stillness again. The man sits for a short time, his hands resting, his body slowly releasing the effort of the day. The woman finishes a final task, then pauses as well. The children grow quiet. There is nothing left to fill the time. Darkness settles in once more, slowly and without resistance. The room fades into shadow, then into near-complete darkness. They prepare for sleep again. The same bed, the same creak, the same uneven surface. Nothing has changed, and nothing is expected to. As the man lies down, there is no sense of completion. The day does not feel finished, it simply stops. Sleep comes gradually, just as it always does. Morning returns again, though it does not feel like something that has arrived. It feels more like something that was always there, waiting quietly behind the darkness. The shift from night day-to-day happens so gently that it almost goes unnoticed. The gray light slowly revealing the same small room, the same worn surfaces, the same still air. The man wakes in the same way he always does, without surprise, without hesitation. There is no moment of stretching or lingering thought. His body simply recognizes that it is time, and so it moves. For a short while, he remains seated on the edge of the bed, not thinking about the day ahead, because there is nothing new to consider. The bed creaks softly as he rises, the sound blending into the familiar background of small, repeated noises that make up his world. His feet touch the floor, and the coolness is exactly as expected. There is no variation, not even slight enough to notice. Outside, the air carries that same early chill. The mist lies low across the ground again, unchanged in appearance from the mornings before. The trees stand in their usual places, silent and still, offering no indication that time has passed. The animals are waiting. Their presence feels constant, as though they have not moved at all since the previous evening. They respond in the same quiet way as the man approaches, shifting slightly, making small, predictable sounds. Feeding them requires no thought. The same movements, the same packing, the same careful attention to small details. Inside the house, the woman wakes and begins her routine. There is no exchange of words about the morning. There is nothing to say that has not already been understood countless times before. The fire must be brought back again. The embers are faint, but still present, hidden beneath ash. With small, careful effort, they are encouraged into flame. It takes time, but there is no need to hurry. Breakfast follows, simple and unchanged. The preparation is quiet, efficient, and familiar. The food is eaten without comment, without pause. It serves its purpose, nothing more. The light outside strengthens gradually. The sky shifts through the same soft tones, none of them remarkable. Another day has begun, though it carries no sense of beginning. The man steps out toward the field again, his path unchanged. The ground beneath his feet feels the same, worn in places where he has walked many times before. Today, there is no single task that stands out. Instead, there are many small things that need attention. A patch of soil that seems slightly uneven, a tool that could be better placed, a section of land that could be cleared more thoroughly. He begins with the soil again. The motion is slow, steady, and repetitive. Each movement blends into the next, forming a continuous rhythm that requires little thought. The body works, and the mind remains quiet. The air is still. There is no wind strong enough to be noticed, no sound beyond the small, consistent noises of work. Even the birds, if they are present, do not disrupt the quiet in any meaningful way. Inside, the woman continues her tasks. A piece of fabric is folded, then unfolded, then adjusted again. It does not need to be perfect, but it is handled with care nonetheless. A small amount of water is carried from one place to another. The action is simple, repeated, and necessary. Nothing about it stands out. If children are present, they move through their day in the same quiet pattern. A small task is completed, then another. There is no questioning, no resistance. The routine is as natural to them as breathing. Time passes, though it does not feel as though it moves. The sun rises higher, but slowly enough that it is not noticed until it has already done so. At some point, the man pauses again. He stands still, resting his hands briefly, looking out across the same stretch of land. There is nothing new to see. The horizon remains unchanged, the trees unmoving, the sky empty of anything unusual. Even the silence feels the same. After a moment, the work continues. A small stone is turned over, then moved aside. It makes little difference, but it is done anyway. These small actions fill the hours, giving them shape without changing their nature. Midday arrives quietly, as it always does. There is no signal, no clear boundary, only the recognition that it is time to pause. The meal is prepared and eaten in the same way as before. There is no variation, no difference in pace. It is a brief interruption, nothing more. The afternoon stretches out, long and unbroken. The work continues, blending together into a steady flow of motion. A tool is inspected, though there is nothing wrong with it. It is set back down in nearly the same place. A small adjustment is made to something that did not require adjusting. The animals shift slightly, their movements predictable and unremarkable. The light begins to soften again. The change is gradual, almost imperceptible, until it is nearly complete. The air cools slightly, though not enough to draw attention. Fatigue returns, settling into the body in the same quiet way as before. Movements slow, though they do not stop. Eventually, the day begins to come to an end. The tools are set aside, not because everything is finished, but because it is time. The distinction is understood without being spoken. The animals are checked again. The same routine, the same quiet sounds, the same steady rhythm. Inside, the fire is brought back to life once more. The process is familiar, requiring little effort. The evening meal is prepared and eaten in the same quiet manner. There is no anticipation, no reflection, just the completion of another necessary task. A few words may be spoken, though they are brief and simple. Nothing that lingers, nothing that changes the rhythm of the day. Afterward, there is stillness. The man sits for a short time, his hands resting, his body slowly releasing the effort of the day. The woman finishes a final small task, then pauses. The children grow quiet. There is nothing left to do. Darkness settles in again, slowly and without resistance. The room fades into shadow, then into near-complete darkness. They prepare for sleep once more. The same bed, the same creak, the same uneven surface. As the man lies down, there is no sense of ending. The day does not feel complete, it simply stops. Sleep comes gradually, just as it always does. The next stretch of time does not begin with waking, but with a brief interruption in sleep. Sometime in the depth of night, the man shifts slightly, not fully awake, but not entirely asleep either. The air inside the room has grown colder, and the faint warmth that once lingered from the fire has nearly disappeared. He pulls the thin covering closer without thinking, adjusting to the discomfort in the same automatic way he has done countless times before. Outside, something moves faintly, perhaps a small animal passing through the yard, or the wood of the barn settling as the temperature drops. The sound is soft, indistinct, and quickly fades. It does not demand attention, and so it is ignored. Sleep returns, slow and shallow. When morning finally comes again, it feels less like a fresh start and more like a continuation of something that has been quietly unfolding without pause. The light enters the room in the same hesitant way, touching the edges of familiar objects without changing them. This time, the man does not rise immediately. He remains lying still for a little longer than usual, not out of choice exactly, but because his body feels heavier. The previous days, indistinguishable as they are, have layered themselves one upon another, and though none of them were particularly difficult on their own, together they create a weight that is hard to separate. Eventually, he sits up. The movement is slower today, though not noticeably so from the outside. Only he feels the slight delay, the faint resistance in his muscles. It does not stop him. Nothing ever really does. The floor meets his feet again, the same cool surface offering the same sensation. He stands, steadying himself briefly, then moves toward the door. The outside looks unchanged, but the air carries a slightly different edge today. Not enough to alter anything, but enough to be noticed if one were paying close attention. The mist is thinner, the sky a touch clearer. The animals respond in the same quiet way, though one of them shifts more than usual, stepping slightly out of place. The man notices, pauses for a moment, then gently guides it back. The action is small, almost insignificant, but it stands out simply because it breaks the perfect repetition of everything else. Inside, the woman begins her morning tasks as always, though today she pauses briefly while tending the fire. The embers are weaker than usual, requiring a bit more effort to bring back. She adjusts the wood carefully, blowing softly to encourage the flame. It takes longer, but eventually the fire responds. Breakfast is prepared in the same manner, though there is a slight delay. Not enough to matter, not enough to change anything, but enough to exist. They eat quietly, as always. The day unfolds again, but not entirely without variation. In the field, the man notices that a small section of earth has hardened more than expected. It resists his tools slightly, requiring more effort to break apart. He adjusts his approach, applying a bit more force, changing the angle just enough to make a difference. This small shift in effort creates a different rhythm, still repetitive, still steady, but not identical to the days before. Nearby, a faint breeze passes through, subtle enough that it barely moves the trees, but noticeable against the stillness that usually defines the air. It does not last long, but for a brief moment, the world feels slightly less fixed. Inside, the woman finishes her mending and sets the fabric aside. Instead of immediately beginning another task, she pauses, her hands resting in her lap for a moment longer than usual. Her gaze drifts toward the small window, watching the light without focusing on anything in particular. It is not a significant moment, but it is different. The children, if present, wander slightly farther from their usual path today. Not far enough to cause concern, but enough to step outside the invisible boundaries they typically follow. One of them pauses to look at something on the ground, a small detail that would normally be ignored. Time continues, but it feels slightly less uniform. Midday arrives, as it always does, but the meal is accompanied by a few more words than usual. Nothing important, nothing that carries beyond the moment, but enough to break the usual silence. The afternoon brings a small, unexpected task. A loose board near the side of the house shifts slightly when touched. It has likely been that way for some time, unnoticed until now. The man examines it briefly, then retrieves a tool. The repair is simple, but it requires attention. The board must be aligned, secured, checked. It is not difficult, but it is different from the usual fieldwork. For a short time, the day feels less predictable. Once the task is finished, the rhythm returns. The field, the tools, the steady motion, all of it resumes its familiar pattern. The brief variation fades, leaving behind only the quiet repetition that defines the rest of the day. As the light begins to soften, the air cools again. The faint breeze from earlier does not return. The world settles back into its usual stillness. The animals are checked once more. Everything is as expected. Inside, the fire is easier to start this time. The earlier effort, leaving enough warmth behind to make the process quicker. The evening meal is prepared and eaten, though tonight there is a slightly longer pause afterward. The man leans back a bit more than usual, his posture less rigid. The woman sets aside her work without immediately replacing it with another task. Nothing is said about it. The silence feels the same, but also slightly different, not heavier or lighter, just present in a new way. As darkness settles in, the routine continues. They prepare for sleep, moving through the same motions as always. The bed creaks, the room quiets, the outside world fades into the background. But as the man lies down, there is a brief moment, barely noticeable, where he does not immediately close his eyes. He He stares into the darkness, not thinking about anything in particular, but not entirely empty either. Something about the day lingers, though it is difficult to define. Then, just as quietly as it appeared, the moment passes. His eyes close. The night settles more deeply this time, stretching out in a way that feels longer, though there is no clear measure to confirm it. The air inside the house grows still, holding onto the last traces of warmth from the fire before slowly letting them fade. Outside, the world remains quiet, but not entirely empty. There are distant, irregular sounds, too faint to identify clearly, too soft to disturb the rhythm of rest. At some point before morning, a light tapping begins. It is not loud, not urgent, just a soft, irregular sound against the outer wall, or perhaps the roof. The man stirs slightly in his sleep, not fully waking, but becoming aware of something different. The sound continues for a short while, light, scattered, almost uncertain. A brief rain, not a storm, not even a steady shower. Just a passing moment where the sky releases a small amount of water before returning to stillness. By the time the man fully wakes, the sound is gone. Morning arrives again, but the air has changed. There is a faint dampness now, a subtle heaviness that lingers close to the ground. The soil outside looks darker, slightly softened. The difference is small, but noticeable. The man steps outside and pauses for just a moment longer than usual. His foot presses lightly into the ground, and it gives slightly under the weight. Not enough to cause concern, but enough to alter the feeling of each step. The animals respond as they always do, though one of them hesitates briefly before moving toward its feed. The man watches it for a second, then continues with the routine. Nothing is wrong, just different. Inside, the woman notices the same change in the air. The fire takes a bit longer to catch this morning, the dampness making the wood less responsive. She adjusts carefully, adding smaller pieces, coaxing the flame with patience. Breakfast is delayed slightly, though not by much. They eat in the same quiet manner, but there is a shared awareness, unspoken, that the day feels different. Not significantly, not enough to change anything that must be done, but enough to be felt. The man returns to the field, and the difference becomes clearer there. The soil, softened by the brief rain, responds more easily to his tool. The effort required is less, the resistance reduced. The rhythm of his work shifts again, becoming smoother, more fluid. This small change alters the pace of the morning. He moves slightly faster, though not intentionally. The work feels lighter, though no less necessary. For a short time, there is a subtle sense of ease that was not present before. Nearby, small traces of water cling to surfaces, on leaves, on wood, on the edges of objects that normally remain dry. They catch the light faintly as the sun rises higher, then gradually disappear. Inside, the woman takes advantage of the change as well. A few items that require cleaning are handled more easily with the available water. The process is still repetitive, still quiet, but slightly more efficient. The children, if present, notice the damp ground in their own way. A footprint lingers longer than usual, holding its shape before slowly fatting. One of them steps deliberately, watching the impression form, then disappear. It is a small moment, but it holds their attention briefly. Time passes, though today it feels slightly more defined. The sun climbs, and with it, the dampness begins to lift. The ground slowly returns to its usual firmness. The air loses its heaviness, becoming more like it was before. By midday, the difference has nearly disappeared. The meal is prepared and eaten as always, though the pace feels just slightly altered by the earlier change. There is no discussion of it. There does not need to be. The afternoon returns to a more familiar rhythm. The soil begins to resist again, though not as much as before. The man adjusts without thinking, his movements adapting naturally. The brief ease of the morning fades into the steady effort of the rest of the day. A small patch of land is cleared more quickly than expected. The man notices, but does not dwell on it. It is simply one less thing to do tomorrow. Nearby, a faint breeze passes again, slightly stronger than before, but still gentle. It moves through the trees, creating a soft, shifting sound that lingers for a few moments before fatting. Inside, the woman finishes her tasks and pauses again, though this time the pause is shorter. The rhythm of the day has returned, and with it, the quiet momentum that carries everything forward. As the afternoon continues, a small inconvenience appears. One of the tools does not function as smoothly as it should. The handle shifts slightly, not enough to break, but enough to require attention. The man stops, examines it, then sets aside the current task. He retrieves what he needs and begins a simple repair. It takes time, not because it is difficult, but because it must be done carefully. The process is steady, deliberate, requiring more focus than the usual repetitive work. For a short while, the day feels more concentrated, more defined. Once the repair is complete, the tool is tested, adjusted slightly, then used again. It works well enough. The rhythm resumes. The light begins to soften, as it always does. The sky shifts gradually. The air cools, and the long stretch of the day begins to draw to a close. The animals are checked again, their behavior unchanged. Inside, the fire is started once more. This time, it catches more easily, the wood having dried again throughout the day. The evening meal is prepared, eaten, and finished in the same quiet manner. But tonight, there is a slight addition. After eating, the man steps outside briefly instead of sitting immediately. He stands near the door, looking out at the land. The ground has returned to its usual state, the brief signs of rain almost entirely gone. The sky above is clear. He does not stay long. There is nothing to hold his attention for more than a moment. Still, the act of stepping outside at this time is not part of the usual pattern. When he returns inside, nothing is said. The woman continues with a small task, then sets it aside. The children grow quiet. The stillness returns, familiar and steady. Darkness settles in once more, filling the room gradually. The fire provides a soft, steady glow for a while, then begins to fade. They prepare for sleep again. The same bed, the same creak, the same quiet settling of the room. As the man lies down, the day feels slightly more defined than the ones before it. Not because anything significant has happened, but because a few small differences have briefly interrupted the usual pattern. But even those differences are already fading. Sleep comes again, steady and unremarkable, and beyond it, another day waits, not entirely different, not entirely the same, but close enough that the rhythm will continue, uninterrupted, carrying everything forward in its slow, quiet way. The next morning arrives with a clearer sky than the one before it. There is no trace of the brief rain now, no dampness in the air, no softness in the ground. It is as though that small interruption has been quietly erased, leaving everything to return to its usual state. The man wakes a little later than he normally does. Not by much, just enough that the light in the room feels slightly more present when he opens his eyes. It is a subtle shift, but one that lingers for a moment. He remains lying still, aware of the difference, though he does not question it. Then, as always, he rises. The bed creaks again, the same familiar sound marking the beginning of movement. His feet meet the floor, and the coolness is unchanged. Whatever difference existed in the timing of his waking does not carry into anything else. Outside, the air feels steady, balanced, not too cold, not too warm. The ground is firm beneath his steps, the brief softness from before completely gone. The animals wait, as they always do. Their routine continues without variation. The same movements, the same quiet sounds, the same steady pace. The man moves through the task without thought, his body following patterns that no longer require attention. Inside, the woman wakes and begins her work. The fire is easier to start this morning, the dryness returning to the wood. The flame catches quickly, growing into a steady source of warmth. Breakfast is prepared with the same simplicity as before. The timing has adjusted slightly because of the later waking, but it does not change the nature of the meal. They eat quietly, the silence familiar and uninterrupted. The day begins again, but today there is a small intention behind the man's work. Not a plan exactly, not something fully formed, but a quiet decision to focus on a particular section of the field that has been left mostly unchanged for some time. It does not demand attention, but it has been noticed repeatedly. And today, without any clear reason, it becomes the center of his effort. He walks toward it, his steps steady, his pace unhurried. The land looks no different than it did before, but the act of choosing it creates a slight shift in the rhythm of the day. The work begins. The soil here is more uneven, requiring a different approach. The tool meets resistance in some places, moves easily in others. The variation forces small adjustments, changes in pressure, in angle, in packing. For the first time in many days, the work does not feel entirely automatic. It still follows a rhythm, but the rhythm is less predictable. Each movement requires just a bit more attention, just enough to keep the mind engaged. Time passes, but it feels slightly more noticeable today. The sun rises higher, the light grows stronger, and the man continues working through the uneven ground. Small progress becomes visible, not dramatic, not significant, but enough to see. A section that was rough begins to smooth out. It does not change the land entirely, but it alters it just enough to stand out. Inside, the woman continues her routine, though she also makes a small adjustment today. Instead of moving from one task to the next in the usual order, she changes the sequence slightly. A pot is prepared earlier than usual. A piece of fabric is set aside for later, instead of being completed immediately. These are small decisions, barely noticeable, but they introduce a subtle variation into the flow of the day. The children, if present, notice the change in the field. One of them lingers at a distance, watching the man work on the uneven ground. There is no interruption, no attempt to help, just quiet observation. Midday approaches, and this time, the pause comes a little more naturally. The work has required more attention, and the body responds with a clearer sense of fatigue. The meal is prepared and eaten as always, but there is a slightly longer rest afterward. No one comments on it. The afternoon continues with the same focus. The man returns to the same section of land, continuing what he started. The progress remains small, but it builds upon itself. The uneven ground becomes more consistent, though not entirely smooth. There is a quiet sense of completion, forming not of the entire task, but of this portion of it. Nearby, the air remains still. There are no interruptions, no changes in weather, no unexpected sounds. Inside, the woman finishes the tasks she rearranged earlier. The change in order does not affect the outcome, but it alters the feeling of the day slightly, making it seem less repetitive, even if only for a moment. As the afternoon begins to fade, the man slows his work, not because he is finished, but because the light is beginning to shift. The sun lowers, casting longer shadows across the field. The section he has worked on looks different now, not dramatically, but enough to notice. He stands for a moment, looking at it. This pause is slightly longer than usual. There is no strong feeling attached to it, no pride, no satisfaction in a dramatic sense. Just a quiet recognition that something has been changed, however small. Then, as always, the work ends. The tools are set aside. The animals are checked. The routine continues. Inside, the fire is lit again. The evening meal is prepared in the same quiet way, eaten without variation. But tonight, there is a slightly different stillness afterward. The man does not sit immediately. Instead, he remains standing for a moment, as if deciding something, though nothing specific comes of it. Eventually, he sits. The woman finishes her tasks, then pauses. The children grow quiet. The room settles into its usual calm. Darkness arrives, steady and familiar. The fire provides a soft glow, then slowly fades. They prepare for sleep once more. The same bed, the same creak, the same quiet settling of the room. As the man lies down, there is a faint sense, barely noticeable, that the day has been slightly more distinct than the ones before it. Not because of anything significant, but because of a small shift in focus, a slight change in pattern. But even that feeling begins to fade as sleep approaches. His eyes close. The day ends, not with a clear conclusion, but with a gradual fading into rest. Before the next morning fully arrives, there is a stretch of time that feels unusually still. The night does not carry even the faint interruptions of before. No passing breeze, no distant movement, no soft tapping of rain. It is a deeper kind of quiet, one that settles over everything and lingers. Inside the house, the air feels slightly heavier, as though it has not moved for hours. The fire has gone completely cold, leaving no trace of warmth behind. Even the faint scent of smoke has begun to fade, replaced by the dry, neutral smell of wood and worn space. The man shifts in his sleep once, then becomes still again. When morning comes, it does so more slowly than usual. The light takes longer to push through the darkness, or perhaps it only feels that way. The sky outside is pale, almost colorless, lacking the subtle variations that sometimes mark the beginning of the day. When the man wakes, he does not immediately open his eyes. He lies still, aware of being awake, but not yet ready to move. There is no clear reason for the pause. The day ahead is no different from any other, and yet his body lingers in stillness for a few moments longer than usual. Eventually, he opens his eyes. The room looks the same, though the light feels softer, less defined. He sits up slowly, the bed creaking in its familiar way, though even that sound seems slightly muted. His feet meet the floor, and the coolness is there, unchanged. Outside, the air feels calm, almost too calm. There is no movement at all. The trees stand completely still, their leaves unmoving. The ground is firm, the sky pale, the world quiet. The animals respond as they always do, though their movements seem slightly slower, as if they too are adjusting to the stillness. The routine continues. Feeding, checking, moving, each action follows the last in the same steady pattern. Nothing interrupts it. Nothing alters its course. Inside, the woman begins her tasks, though she moves a bit more slowly today. Not enough to delay anything, but enough to be felt in the rhythm of her work. The fire takes longer to start, not because the wood is damp, but because the air feels reluctant to carry the flame. She adjusts carefully, patient as always, until the fire finally steadies. Breakfast is prepared and eaten in the same quiet manner. There are no additional words, no noticeable changes, only a slightly extended sense of stillness surrounding everything. The day begins again, but today the stillness continues. Out in the field, the man resumes his work on the same section of land from the previous day. The uneven ground still requires attention, though it is now closer to being even. He begins where he left off. The tool moves through the soil with a steady rhythm, but the absence of wind, of sound, of any small distractions makes each movement feel more isolated. The quiet is not peaceful, but complete. There is nothing to interrupt it. Time passes, though it feels slower today. The sun rises, but without the usual sense of progression. The light grows stronger, yet it does so without drawing attention to itself. The man pauses at one point, standing still, listening. There is nothing to hear. Even the faint sounds that usually exist, the distant movement of animals, the soft shifting of leaves, are absent. The silence is total. After a moment, he returns to work. Inside, the woman continues her tasks, though she pauses more often today. Not out of fatigue, but as if there is nothing pushing her from one task to the next. The usual flow feels less defined. She finishes one task, then waits a moment before beginning another. The children, if present, are quieter than usual. Their movements are slower, their attention less scattered. One of them sits for a while without doing anything at all, simply existing within the stillness. Midday arrives, though it feels less distinct than usual. The meal is prepared and eaten. But even this moment of pause does not feel like a break from the day. It feels like part of the same continuous stretch of quiet. The afternoon continues in the same way. The man works steadily, nearing the completion of the section of land he has been focusing on. The soil is more even now, the surface more consistent. He slows as he approaches the end, not because the work is more difficult, but because there is less of it left to do. Each movement becomes more deliberate, more precise. Eventually, he stops. The section is not perfect, but it is complete enough. He stands still, looking at it. This time, the pause is longer. There is no strong emotion attached to it, no satisfaction, no disappointment. Just a quiet awareness that something has reached its end, however small. He turns away. The rest of the afternoon passes without variation. Small tasks are completed, tools are adjusted, nothing stands out. The stillness remains. As the light begins to fade, the world does not seem to change as much as it usually does. The transition from day to evening feels slower, more gradual, as though time itself has stretched. The animals are checked again, their behavior unchanged. Inside, the fire is lit once more. It catches more easily now, the air no longer resisting as it did in the morning. The evening meal is prepared and eaten. No words are spoken this time. The silence is complete, uninterrupted. Afterward, the man sits, his hands resting, his posture still. The woman finishes her last task, then sits as well. The children remain quiet. No one moves for a while. There is nothing to fill the space, and nothing that needs to. Darkness settles in slowly, covering the room without resistance. They prepare for sleep, moving through the same familiar motions. The bed creaks again. The room grows still. As the man lies down, the stillness of the day lingers more strongly than before. It is not uncomfortable, but it is noticeable. His eyes remain open for a moment, longer than usual. Then they close. Sleep comes, quiet and steady. The night does not feel like it ends in a clear way this time. Instead, it seems to thin out slowly, as if the darkness itself becomes less dense rather than being replaced by morning. There is no sudden shift, no obvious moment where one can say the day has begun. Inside the house, everything remains still for a long time. The man wakes before he is fully aware that he has woken. His eyes open without urgency, and for a few seconds, he does not move at all. The usual sense of routine is there, but it feels slightly distant, as if it is not yet fully attached to him. The room looks unchanged, but quieter in a different way. Not emptier, just more evenly silent, as though even the idea of movement has been paused. He sits up slowly. The bed creaks, but the sound feels softer than usual, almost absorbed by the air instead of traveling through it. His feet touch the floor, and the coolness is there again. But even that sensation feels slightly less sharp. Outside, the world is waiting in its familiar form, yet something about it feels subtly held back. The trees are still, the ground unchanged, but the light is not yet fully formed. It hangs in a pale, unfinished state. The animals do not move as quickly today, not lazily, not out of weakness, just with less immediate response, as though even they are not entirely certain the day has properly started. The man feeds them in the usual way, but the rhythm feels slightly delayed, like every action is waiting half a second longer than expected. Inside, the woman begins her routine, but there is a brief hesitation before the fire is even approached. She stands near it for a moment, looking at it, before finally starting the usual process. The fire itself behaves differently, not refusing, not struggling, but responding in a slower sequence. The first spark takes longer. The second comes unevenly. Only after a few attempts does the flame finally settle into something stable. Breakfast follows, but the timing has shifted again. Everything is slightly delayed, yet still complete. The day begins, but unevenly, as if it has not fully synchronized with itself. Out in the field, the man notices it immediately. The soil feels normal under the tool, but the sense of rhythm is off. His movements are correct, but the flow between them is not as smooth as before. There is a faint interruption between actions, something that cannot be seen but is clearly felt. He continues anyway. The work progresses, but more through effort than rhythm. Each motion stands slightly apart from the next, rather than blending together as it usually does. The silence around him is still present, but it feels different now. Not total, not heavy, just incomplete. As if something small is missing from it. Inside, the woman moves from task to task, but each transition requires a brief pause. She finishes one action, then remains still for a moment before beginning the next, as if waiting for a signal that never arrives. The children, if present, behave similarly. They start something, then stop briefly before continuing. Their attention does not scatter, it simply hesitates. Time continues, but it does not flow smoothly. Midday arrives without clarity. There is no clear sense of when work stops and rest begins. The meal is prepared, but the act of eating feels slightly disconnected from the usual rhythm. The pause afterward is longer, but not intentional. It is as if the day itself is unsure of its boundaries. In the afternoon, the man continues working, but now he begins to notice something more specific. Small actions are still correct, but their connection to each other feels weakened. A movement is completed, but the transition to the next feels slightly detached, like separate pieces instead of a continuous process. The land itself has not changed, but the experience of working on it has. Inside, the woman pauses in the middle of a task and simply remains still for longer than usual. There is no reason for it, no decision behind it. She eventually resumes, but without clear motivation. The sense of repetition is still there, but the feeling of continuity is not. As the afternoon fades, the light behaves normally, yet everything beneath it feels slightly out of alignment. Shadows form as expected, but they do not feel connected to the objects casting them. The animals are checked again. Everything is in place. Everything is correct, but it feels slightly distant. Inside, the fire is lit more quickly this time, as if compensating for earlier delay. The flame is steady, but it does not seem to connect fully with the room around it. The evening meal is prepared and eaten. There is silence again, but not the same silence as before. This one has gaps in it, small, invisible breaks where nothing seems to continue. Afterward, the man sits for a long time without moving, not resting, not thinking, just remaining in place, while the sense of the day slowly settles around him without fully becoming whole. The woman finishes her final task, then stops. The children are quiet. No one speaks. Darkness arrives, but even it feels slightly delayed, as if it has to catch up to itself before settling fully into the room. They prepare for sleep. The bed creaks, but the sound does not fully complete itself in the air. It fades too quickly as the man lies down. His eyes remain open longer than usual. There is no clear thought in his mind, only a faint awareness that something about the day never fully arrived. Then slowly, his eyes close. Sleep comes, but even it feels slightly incomplete, like everything else. The night does not hold its shape properly this time. It feels less like a complete stretch of darkness and more like a series of quiet pauses stitched together. Moments of stillness appear, then loosen, then settle again, without ever fully becoming one continuous whole. Inside the house, the air feels lighter, but not in a comforting way. It is as if something has been removed, though it is impossible to say what. The usual weight of familiarity is still present, but it no longer presses evenly on everything. The man wakes without a clear sense of having slept. His eyes open, and for a moment, he does not recognize the transition. There is no sense of morning arriving, no feeling that a new day has begun. Instead, it feels as though he is simply continuing from somewhere undefined. He sits up. The bed responds, but the sound is weak, almost hesitant. The creak does not fully carry through the room, as if part of it is being absorbed before it can complete itself. His feet touch the floor, but even the contact feels slightly detached, like the sensation is arriving a fraction too late. Outside, the world is visible, but not fully present. The land is there, the trees are there, the sky is there, but none of it feels fully connected. It is as if each part exists independently, without the usual sense that everything belongs to the same moment. The animals are waiting, but their movements are reduced, simplified. They respond when approached, but without the usual continuity. Each action feels like a single, isolated event, rather than part of a routine. The man feeds them, but the sequence of movement does not flow. It starts, stops, resumes, not in interruption, but in separation. Inside, the woman is already awake, but she stands still for a long time before beginning anything. The fire is approached, then paused before being worked on. Her hands hover slightly before acting, as though waiting for a signal that does not fully arrive. When the fire is finally started, it does not grow in stages. It simply appears. A small flame becomes stable without the usual progression. It feels less like ignition and more like placement. Breakfast follows, but the sense of preparation is reduced. The steps happen, but they do not connect smoothly into a process. Eating feels like a sequence of unrelated moments. The day begins, but without structure. Out in the field, the man notices the change more clearly now. The ground is unchanged. The tools are unchanged. But the sense of doing the work is no longer continuous. Each movement stands alone. Lift, place, turn, adjust. There is no rhythm connecting them. Only isolated actions occurring in the same space. Even the silence around him feels fragmented. It is not broken by sound, but by absence that does not connect across time. Each moment of quiet feels separate from the next. Inside, the woman moves through her tasks in the same way. She completes something, then stops entirely before beginning the next. Not out of hesitation, but because nothing carries her forward. Time is no longer flowing. It is occurring in pieces. Midday arrives without transition. The meal is present, but not preceded by a sense of arrival. It simply exists in the middle of the day without forming part of it. Eating is completed, then the act ends without continuation. There is no pause afterward, because there is no sense of before or after. In the afternoon, the fragmentation becomes clearer. The man continues working, but now even the idea of continuing feels inaccurate. Each movement is new, unrelated to the last. He is not maintaining work, he is repeatedly beginning it. The field does not feel different, but the experience of being in it does. Inside, the woman finishes one task and then stands still for an extended moment. Not waiting, not thinking, simply not transitioning. Eventually, she begins something else, but it does not feel like a sequence. The children, if present, move in the same way. A step is taken, then another, but without continuity between them. Their actions do not build, they simply occur. The afternoon light changes, but even that change feels disconnected from time. Shadows shift, yet there is no sense that anything is progressing. Everything is happening, but nothing is unfolding. As evening approaches, the world does not darken in a gradual way. Instead, light simply becomes less available in certain places, then more absent in others, without forming a complete transition. The animals are checked. Each action feels like a separate instance, rather than part of a routine. Inside, the fire appears again, not started, not lit, but simply present in its stable form. It exists without process. The evening meal is eaten in silence that does not feel continuous enough to be called silence. It is more like repeated absences of sound. Afterward, the man sits, but even sitting does not feel like duration. It feels like a single moment repeated without change. The woman stands, then stops. The children are quiet, but not together in quietness, each in their own isolated stillness. Darkness does not arrive. It simply is not there in certain places, until gradually it is in all places, but without arrival. The room does not become night. It simply ceases to be fully visible. They prepare for sleep, but the preparation does not feel like a sequence. Lying down is not preceded by anything. It simply occurs. The bed creaks, but the sound does not complete itself. It begins and ends too quickly to to form a whole. As the man lies down, there is no sense of time passing. There is only a series of moments that do not connect. His eyes remain open, not because he is thinking, but because even closing them does not feel like a transition anymore. Then, without sequence, without flow, without warning, sleep happens. There is a moment, if it can still be called a moment, where nothing happens at all. Not night, not morning, not transition. Just absence of connection between anything that exists. Then, slowly, something begins to return. Not fully, not cleanly, but enough to suggest structure. The man becomes aware of himself again, though not in the usual way. There is no clear sensation of waking. Instead, it feels like awareness assembling itself in fragments, one thought here, another there, until they loosely resemble consciousness. His eyes open. The room is there, but it does not feel unified. The walls exist, the floor exists, the light exists, but not as part of the same moment. They are simply present in proximity. He sits up, and this time the movement feels less like action and more like occurrence. No beginning, no transition, just a change in position that is noticed after it has already happened. The bed is there beneath him, but even its presence feels incomplete, as if only part of it is being registered at once. Outside, the world appears again, but differently. Not broken, not missing, just unjoined. The sky does not feel connected to the ground. The ground does not feel connected to him. Everything exists in its own isolated certainty, without forming a shared reality. The animals are there, but their presence is no longer part of a routine. They do not wait. They simply exist in the same area. He feeds them, but the action no longer feels like a process. There is no sequence of preparation, movement, completion. Only the fact that something has changed location. Inside, the woman is present, but her actions are no longer arranged in order. She is near the fire, and the fire is burning, but neither feels like it caused the other. The flame does not feel started. It simply is. The wood does not feel consumed. It simply changes. Breakfast appears in fragments of action that do not connect into cooking. There is no preparation, only result. The day does not begin. It is simply there. Out in the field, the man stands for a long time without the sense that standing is ongoing. There is no time spent. There is only the repeated awareness that he is in a place where work would normally happen. He lifts a tool, but the lift is not felt as motion. It is only known afterward that the tool is higher than before. The ground is unchanged, yet it does not feel like a surface being worked on. There is no sense of impact, resistance, or progress. Soil and tool share space without interaction being experienced as interaction. Even thought itself is reduced to isolated appearances. No planning, no remembering, only fragments that arise and disappear without forming continuity. Inside, the woman is no longer moving from task to task. There are no tasks. There are only moments where something is different and then not. The children, if they are present, are not moving through anything resembling behavior. A posture exists, then another posture exists, with no sense of transition between them. Midday is not reached. It is simply noticed that something like midday could be assumed. The meal is not prepared. It is simply encountered in a state that resembles food. Eating happens without sequence. There is no hunger leading to it, no completion following it, just the presence of consumption. The afternoon does not unfold. It does not exist long enough to unfold. There are only scattered recognitions. The tool is somewhere else. The body is somewhere else. The light is different. But none of these changes form a continuous experience. Even the idea of continuing has lost meaning, because nothing is continuing from anything else. Even evening does not arrive. It is simply no longer possible to see as clearly. The animals are there or not there, depending on the instant of noticing. The fire exists without origin, without maintenance, without decline. The house is not entered or left. It is simply sometimes present in awareness and sometimes not. There is no silence, because silence requires continuity. There is only absence of interruption, and then without transition, without descent into night. Sleep is not entered. It simply occurs in one of the unconnected gaps. No lying down, no closing of eyes, no awareness of ending. And beyond it, there is no next day, only a scattering of potential moments that have not yet decided whether they belong to anything at all. At first, there is nothing that could be called return. No morning, no night, no shift, just a long, unstructured presence, like something waiting, without knowing what it is waiting for. Then, very slowly, fragments begin to align again, not into a full world, but into the idea of one. A sensation gathers subtle, uncertain, that something is becoming consistent. The man is aware before he is aware of himself. A faint recognition forms without identity. There is something like waking, though it does not feel like waking has a beginning. Then awareness tightens. The room returns in uneven pieces. A corner of the wall is present first, then a portion of the floor, then the shape of light across wood. None of it arrives together, but over a span that cannot be measured, it becomes enough to form a setting. He is sitting, or rather, he becomes aware that sitting is the condition he is in. There is no motion into it, no transition out of anything, just placement within a configuration. Outside, the world does not reassemble as a whole. Instead, it appears in layers. The ground becomes recognizable before the sky does. The sky becomes visible before its color stabilizes. The trees exist before they are clearly trees, and yet despite this fragmentation, something new is present. Coherence is trying to return. The animals are there again, but now they feel reconnected to purpose. Not because anything has been decided, but because their presence begins to link itself to action. Feeding happens, not as a routine, but as a re-emerging pattern. The man does not think about doing it. He simply finds himself in the state where it is already being done, and then recognizes it afterward. Inside, the woman is near the fire again. This time, the fire is not simply existing. It flickers. That flicker matters, not because of what it is, but because it behaves like something that can continue. The wood, the flame, the air, they begin to relate to each other again in small, fragile ways. Breakfast is not a sequence, but it is no longer pure fragment either. There is repetition returning. A sense that one action resembles another previous action, even if that previous is not clearly reachable. Out in the field, the man stands with the tool again. The ground is there, and this time, when the tool meets it, something faintly registers as resistance, not fully experienced as before, but enough that actions begin to link again. Lift, press, turn. These are not yet a rhythm, but they are no longer isolated events. Something between them exists again, thin, unstable, but real. Inside, movement returns in a similar way. The woman does not simply appear in different positions anymore. There is a sense, fragile but growing, that she moves through space rather than simply being found in it. The children, if present, begin to show continuity in small ways. A glance that seems to follow a previous glance. A pause that feels slightly connected to what came before. Time is still broken, but it is a tempting structure again. Midpoint of the day is not declared, but it is recognized. The meal is not scheduled, but it is repeated in a way that feels faintly familiar to something earlier. The afternoon begins to gather shape, not fully, not reliably, but enough that actions start to resemble a pattern instead of isolated occurrences. The man continues working, and now the field begins to feel like a place again, not just a location of scattered moments. Progress is not clear, but persistence is returning. The sun moves in the sky, and this time its movement feels slightly more continuous. Not smooth, not natural, but no longer entirely disconnected. Even silence begins to reform, not as emptiness, but as duration, a kind of space where things are not happening, rather than gaps where nothing exists. Evening approaches, not suddenly, not cleanly, but as a gradual reduction in clarity that feels somewhat familiar again. The animals are checked, and the act feels like part of something that has been happening. Inside, the fire is tended, and this time tending feels like continuation rather than reappearance. The meal is eaten, and after it, there is a pause that feels like it belongs to something. Not just absence, but But waiting, the man sits, and for the first time in what feels like an immeasurable stretch, sitting feels like something that can last. The woman is still. The children are still, not separately, but in the same shared stillness again. Darkness arrives, not as scattered loss of visibility, but as a gradual covering that connects itself across the room. The house becomes night again. Properly this time, they lie down. The bed creaks, and the sound carries through the space in a single, continuous line. As the man closes his eyes, he does not lose awareness in fragments anymore. He drifts, and in that drifting, there is something almost familiar returning, a sense that tomorrow might actually follow today. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough that the world has begun, once again, to behave like a world. The night holds its shape more firmly now, not perfectly, but enough that it feels continuous again. Darkness is no longer scattered or uncertain. It settles across the room in one steady layer, as if it has remembered how to exist properly. Sleep comes without fragmentation, not suddenly, not in pieces, but as a gradual sinking into rest that feels whole again. When morning returns, it does so with hesitation, but not confusion. There is a sense of arrival now, however faint. The light does not simply appear, it grows. Slowly, unevenly at first, then more consistently as the room becomes visible again. The man wakes, and this time, waking feels like a process that belongs to him again. He remains still for a moment, but it is no longer disconnection. It is rest finishing its cycle. Then he sits up. The bed creaks, and the sound carries properly through the room again, complete, uninterrupted. The sensation of movement follows through his body in a way that feels unified. Outside, the world is not fully restored, but it is stabilizing. The ground feels like ground again. The sky feels like sky. The distance between objects is no longer uncertain. Things are separate, but connected within the same reality. The animals are there, and this time their presence feels anchored again. They respond in a way that belongs to routine rather than isolated occurrence. The man feeds them, and the actions form a sequence that holds together without breaking apart. Inside, the woman is already moving when he returns. The fire is present and stable, not newly appearing, not struggling to exist, just continuing. Breakfast happens again, but now there is sequence. Prepare right, arrow cook right, arrow eat right, arrow pause. It is not perfect. It still feels slightly fragile, but it exists as structure. The day begins, properly this time. Out in the field, the man works again, and the work now feels like work rather than isolated motion. Lift becomes part of press. Press becomes part of turn. Turn becomes part of clearing. The rhythm is not smooth yet, but it is forming, like something remembering its shape. The land responds again in a meaningful way. Resistance is felt. Change is noticed. Progress is small but continuous. Inside, the woman moves from task to task with fewer pauses. Not because everything is automatic again, but because transitions are beginning to reconnect. Time is still delicate, but it is holding. Hours begin to exist again as stretches rather than fragments. Midday arrives with a faint sense of recognition. The meal is prepared in steps that follow each other again. Eating feels like part of a day rather than an isolated act. Afterward, there is rest, and that rest feels like it belongs to something ongoing. The afternoon continues the restoration. Not dramatic, not sudden, but steady. The man notices that even fatigue feels normal again, not broken or disconnected, but something that builds over time. The field begins to resemble what it was before everything started to separate. Not identical, but coherent. Inside, the woman completes tasks in sequence again. The children, if present, begin to follow patterns of movement that resemble yesterday's actions and tomorrow's expectations. Even silence returns in its proper form, not absence, but space between events. As evening approaches, the world transitions properly. Light fades gradually. Shadows extend consistently. The day does not collapse, it concludes. The animals are checked, and the act feels like part of a routine that has existed before and will exist again. Inside, the fire is maintained rather than recreated. Its glow is steady, dependable. Dinner is eaten, and afterward, the pause returns. But now it feels natural, not empty, not broken, just stillness after continuity. The man sits, and for the first time in what feels like a long uncertainty, the sitting feels like part of a full day again. The woman finishes her final task and joins the stillness. The children are quiet in a way that feels familiar, not disconnected. Outside, night arrives in one continuous motion. The house does not lose itself anymore. It simply becomes darker. They prepare for sleep, and when the man lies down, there is no sense of things slipping apart again. Only the steady awareness that time is once more behaving like time. Sleep comes gently. The morning arrives with a kind of steadiness that now feels earned rather than assumed. It is not perfect, nothing here is, but it is continuous. The light does not hesitate as it enters the room. It spreads across the wooden surfaces in a way that feels connected, as if every part of the room is receiving the same moment at the same time. The man wakes, and for the first time, there is no uncertainty in the act itself. Waking is waking again, not a fragment, not a delay, not an incomplete return, just a transition from sleep into awareness that holds its shape. He sits up, the bed creaks, and the sound behaves normally, fatting into the room rather than breaking apart. His movement feels unified, his body no longer divided into separate sensations. Outside, the world is stable. The ground is the ground. The sky is the sky. The space between them feels consistent again, no longer drifting or disconnected. The animals are there, and their presence is no longer uncertain. They respond as expected, as remembered. Feeding them is once again part of a repeating structure that feels intact. Inside, the woman is already moving, and her movement is no longer interrupted by hesitation or delay. The fire is present, not newly formed, not strangely appearing, just continuing. Breakfast happens in sequence again, simple, ordinary sequence that now feels almost comforting in its predictability. Prepare, cook, eat, clean. Each step leads to the next without resistance. The day begins again, and this time it begins fully. Out in the field, the man returns to work, and the work holds together. Each motion connects to the next. The tool feels like an extension of intention again. The soil responds in a predictable, physical way. There is resistance, then change, then progress. Not dramatic, but real. The rhythm of labor returns, not as something forced, but as something remembered. Inside, the woman moves through her tasks without pause between them. One action leads naturally into another. The sense of waiting between moments is gone. Time is no longer scattered. It flows, not quickly, not slowly, but consistently. Midday arrives with clarity again, not announced, not measured, but recognized as a part of the same continuous structure. The meal is prepared in order. It is eaten in order. And afterward, rest follows in order. Nothing feels isolated anymore. Even silence has regained meaning. It is no longer absence, but spacing between events that belong together. The afternoon continues the same way. The man works through the field, and now even small changes feel connected to previous effort. What was done earlier affects what is done now. There is memory in the land again, not just physically, but in experience. Inside, the woman's tasks no longer feel like separate occurrences. They are part of a chain again, one that stretches back into the morning and forward into the evening. The children, if present, move within this restored rhythm too. Their actions are no longer scattered. They follow patterns again, simple, repeated, familiar. Even fatigue behaves properly now. It builds, it accumulates, it makes sense. As evening approaches, the world transitions smoothly. Light fades without interruption. Shadows extend gradually, connecting one moment of time to the next. The animals are checked, and the act feels like part of a routine that has always existed and will continue. Inside, the fire is tended, not restarted. Its glow is steady, dependable, alive, in a way that feels continuous. Dinner is prepared and eaten in sequence, and afterward, the pause returns. But now it is not emptiness. It is rest after a complete day. The man sits, and this time sitting feels like the natural end of a long, connected structure of time. The woman finishes her final task and joins the stillness. The children are quiet in the same shared quiet. Outside, night arrives without hesitation. The house does not break apart into darkness. It becomes night. They prepare for sleep, and everything moves in order again, one step following another, without gaps, without fragmentation. The bed creaks softly as the man lies down, and as his eyes close, there is a quiet certainty, not loud, not emotional, just present, that tomorrow will follow today in the same continuous way. Sleep comes fully. The night carries through without interruption now, but it is no longer something that feels like a separate condition. It is simply the continuation of everything else. Darkness does not arrive anymore, it remains, and time moves within it. Sleep is no longer a gap. It is part of the same flow. When morning comes again, it does so quietly, without effort. The light spreads evenly across the room, as if it already knows where everything is. The man wakes, and there is no sense of return, because nothing ever left. He opens his eyes and simply continues being where he already is. There is no confusion, no adjustment, no moment of reassembly. Awareness is already complete. He sits up, the bed creaks, and the sound belongs to the room instantly, not as a new event, but as part of a continuing environment. His feet touch the floor, and the sensation is immediate and familiar, in a stable way, not surprising, not newly formed. Outside, the world is fully consistent again. Not perfect, not extraordinary, just whole. The ground is continuous underfoot. The sky is continuous above. The space between them no longer fractures into separate impressions. The animals are present as part of the same ongoing reality. Their movement, their sound, their presence all belong to the same connected moment. Feeding them is not a task that begins. It is simply something that is done within the day. Inside, the woman is already in motion, and her motion is part of the same flow. The fire is not started or maintained. It is simply there as part of the household's continuing state. Breakfast is not prepared as separate steps anymore. It is part of a cycle that no longer feels segmented. Everything leads into everything else without resistance. The day continues. Out in the field, the man works, and the work is no longer something that must start. It is already in progress the moment attention reaches it. Tool, soil, movement, change, these are not separate acts. They are one continuous process, expressed in different forms. The field itself feels integrated again. What was done yesterday is present in what is done now, not as memory, but as continuity. Inside, the woman's tasks flow without pause. One action does not end before the next begins. It simply transforms into it. Even stillness has regained its proper role. It is not emptiness, but part of rhythm. Midday does not arrive as a marked point. It is recognized as part of the same ongoing structure. Food is prepared, eaten, and completed without separation from the rest of the day. Afterward, rest is not a break, it is a phase. The afternoon carries forward in the same unified way. The man continues working, and there is no sense of isolation between efforts. Everything is connected, even the smallest adjustments. The woman continues her tasks, and each one fits naturally into the next, without hesitation or delay. The children, if present, move within the same continuity, no longer separate from it, but part of it. Even time itself feels rejoined. Not faster, not slower, just whole. As evening approaches, the transition is smooth and unbroken. Light fades as part of the same system that brought it forward. Nothing snaps, nothing breaks. The animals are checked, and the act belongs to the day without distinction. Inside, the fire continues without needing attention to continue. Dinner is part of the same flow of events. Eating is not a pause, it is a stage. Afterward, stillness returns, but it is not emptiness. It is completion within continuity. The man sits, and sitting is no longer an endpoint. It is simply where the flow passes through. The woman is present beside him in the same shared continuity. The children are quiet within it. Outside, night is not something that arrives. It is simply the same world under a different state of light. They prepare for sleep, but preparation is not a sequence. It is already part of the ongoing cycle. The man lies down, the bed creaks, and the sound is fully integrated into everything else. His eyes close, not as an ending, but as a transition within continuity. Sleep comes not as disappearance, but as part of the same unbroken existence. And beyond it, there is no next in the old sense. There is no longer a clear distinction between one day and the next, not because time has stopped, but because it has settled into something smoother, something that no longer announces its own movement. Morning does not arrive. It is simply already there. The man becomes aware of being awake in the same way one becomes aware of breathing, without noticing when it began. His eyes are open. The room is present, and there is no gap between sleep and waking anymore. He sits up, and the movement is not a transition. It is simply a change in position within the same continuous state of being. The bed creaks, but even the sound feels integrated now, like it belongs to the structure of the world, rather than interrupting it. Outside, the land is unchanged, but it is also not being checked or re-entered. It is simply part of the same ongoing reality that has never left. The animals are there, not as a task, not as a responsibility that begins, but as part of the environment that includes him. Feeding them happens, but not as an action that starts and ends. It is more like participation in a system already in motion. Inside, the woman is already present in the same continuity. The fire does not need to be started or maintained. It is simply part of the house's ongoing condition. Breakfast is not prepared. It is reached. A sequence exists, but it no longer feels like steps. It feels like flow, movement within something already complete. The day continues, but even the word continues feels unnecessary now. Out in the field, the man works, but there is no sense of entering work. He is already within it. The tool is already moving. The soil is already changing. The body is already aligned with action. There is no beginning to effort anymore, only ongoing transformation. Inside, the woman's tasks are no longer distinct units. They are variations of the same motion, shifting shape rather than changing state. Even rest and activity are no longer opposites. They are expressions of the same continuity. Time itself has lost its segmented nature entirely, not collapsed, not broken, but unified. Midday is not noticed as a point. It is simply part of the middle of ongoing experience. Food is consumed as part of the flow, not as interruption. Afternoon is not entered. It is simply another phase of the same continuous existence. The man works, but even fatigue is no longer something that accumulates separately. It is just a gradual change in the quality of ongoing motion. The woman continues, and her continuation is not marked by transitions. The children, if present, exist within the same unbroken rhythm. Their actions no longer isolated even in thought. Even silence has dissolved into continuity. It is no longer the absence between events. It is the texture of everything happening. As evening approaches, there is no shift that can be clearly identified. Light simply becomes less dominant in the same unified field of experience. The animals are present. The fire is present. The house is present. And none of these require attention to remain. Dinner is not a separate event. It is part of the same unbroken movement. Afterward, there is no afterward, only stillness within continuity. The man sits, but sitting is no longer a state. It is simply one expression of being. The woman is there. The children are there, not together in a moment, but within the same ongoing presence. Night is not entered. It is simply the same world, without emphasis. The man lies down. The bed does not creak as an event. It creaks as part of the environment that is already complete. His eyes close. There is no sleep as transition anymore, only ongoing awareness, shifting its texture. And beyond everything that might once have been called a next day, there is nothing new arriving, because there is no longer anything that needs to begin again. There is no longer anything that can be clearly called another day, not because everything has ended, but because nothing is separating itself anymore. Everything exists as one uninterrupted condition, still, continuous, Unmarked, the man does not wake, because waking implies a return from somewhere else. There is no elsewhere anymore. There is only being. He opens his eyes, though even that description feels unnecessary. Vision is already present. Awareness is already present. The room is not entered. It is simply there as part of what is. The bed is not left. It is simply no longer distinguished from the rest of existence. He sits, and the motion is not movement between states. It is only a shift within the same unbroken presence. Outside, the land is not observed. It is not approached. It is not re-encountered. It is simply included. The animals are not part of a routine. They are not part of a schedule. They are not even seen in the old sense. They are simply within the same field of existence. Feeding them is not an act. It is a continuation of presence where change happens without separation. Inside, the woman is not beginning her tasks. She is not continuing them either. There is no difference anymore between doing and being in place. The fire is not lit. It is not maintained. It is simply part of the ongoing reality, like everything else. Breakfast is not prepared. It occurs within the same continuity that contains everything else, without standing apart from it. The field is not worked. The soil is not changed. There is only transformation happening, without distinction between moments. No beginning of labor, no end of labor, only motion without edges. Time is no longer a sequence. It is a single state that has stopped pretending to be divided. Midday does not arrive. Even that concept dissolves, because arrival requires distance. There is no distance anymore. There is only presence in different intensities. Eating, resting, moving, these are no longer events. They are variations in the same unbroken existence. Even silence has disappeared as a concept because it required something to interrupt. Nothing is being interrupted anymore. As evening would have come, there is no shift in light that defines it. There is only the gradual, unmeasured change of the same totality. The house is not entered. It is simply where existence is occurring. The fire is not seen. It is simply part of what is present. Night is not entered. Sleep is not entered. Nothing is entered. Nothing is left. The man does not lie down. There is no down to lie into. There is no up to leave. There is only the complete, unbroken state of being that contains all actions without separating them into actions. And within that final stillness, even the idea of a next part cannot form, because there is no longer anything that could follow anything else. Only this, only now, only the quiet, continuous existence that does not begin and does not end.